Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking about trauma and how it impacts every aspect of our life, from our emotions and our choices, and even down to our physical health. And sometimes we don't even realize we have trauma, but yet there's signs in our life that would say, there probably is something, some sort of wounding that's keeping you stuck. And that's why I wrote the book Unstuck. That's why I do the work I do. And it's really a result of my own journey and being really stuck, but also very successful in my business world and working my way up in Fortune 500 companies. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here to share just about my journey and like what I've learned along the way. I've been a nurse for 23 years now and certified as a nurse coach, a holistic coach, certified in functional medicine, and also as a mental health coach with a specialty in trauma and crisis.
Wow, it's great to hear from you, and such an expert you are here. And for all the listeners, let's dive in. And we have Megan uh, Babcock here for podcast, and you guys listening from Dubai right now. And we are not going live, and it will be an edited version, but this will be uncensored. And Megan, I have a lot of question about trauma, and I have receiving some feedbacks, and we can see a lot of youngsters, especially, they couldn't identify what is the term called trauma and how its impact on the life and the decision
Mhm.
making. And from your point of view, the term trauma means what, and how you seeing it, and yeah.
Well, thanks for the question and thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here and share what I've learned in my own journey, what I know from being a nurse and in my training in the mental health space. Uh, I'm going to talk a little bit about just my own story because I would have never said I had trauma. I have parents that have been married for 40 plus years. I went to college. They supported me. And I actually had a really traumatic event happen in my life, but I had dismissed it. And I just thought, well, you were not in the right place. You were disobedient, if you will. I had gone someplace that I shouldn't have gone. And so what happened, I kind of took on all of the blame and just decided, well, there are consequences to our choices. And so I just shoved it down and kept going with life. And I would think about trauma as war, people going to war, people living in war zones, um, people who were being abused in really significant ways. Well, I had suffered abuse, but I had dismissed it. And so a lot of times and then those are big traumas. So in the trauma world, they talk about big T and little t. And I think, it's okay to kind of try to categorize things, but really it's about the impact of an event on your life and how it's showing up in your future, right? So you can have trauma and you can have support and you can process it, you can integrate it into your life and make sense of it as best you can and not have it continue to impact you because you get healing, or you can ignore it and you can become a high achiever, a people pleaser, someone who even copes in ways of alcohol and drugs. There's all of these different things that we can turn to. So, what I like people to look at is what is happening in their life. Are they happy with their life? Are they overwhelmed? Are they feeling burnt out? Well, those are all signs that our nervous system is telling us something isn't right. And so, whether it's big T, little t, something your teacher said when you were little that made you feel like you weren't worthy or you weren't capable, those are impacting your life and keeping you stuck. I believe
Mm.
we were all gifted with dreams. We were all placed here for a purpose. And so if you're not being able to let that out and you're just stuck,
Yeah.
then let's get curious about it instead of turning to all of these other ways of coping. And what happens is that event, that moment where you were wounded, continues the wounding, and you just get greater and greater trauma.
Mm.
And that was a hard realization for me that, like, I was actually participating in traumatizing myself by not
Wow.
dealing with the past.
Wow. And I have seen a new upcoming book, Unstuck. And can we have
Yeah.
some words about it? And what do you think?
Sure. So Unstuck is really it's a coach in a book. I want to give people the skills to be able to coach their own life. And so I walk through in the first four chapters some education on
Mm.
what is trauma, what is generational trauma, what could be happening in your life or in your body that would point to you need to get curious. And then I help them with prompts and different skills in each of those chapters to help them navigate through that hard. So the first four chapters is kind of let's get real. Let's get honest. Let's be vulnerable about the things that we haven't wanted to talk about or acknowledge because I believe you cannot heal what you're not willing to reveal. Like your body is telling you, your mind is telling you, you have anxiety. We talk in those first four chapters about, when I was in college, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome. I ended up with severe migraines. I was a healthy person, and no doctor sat down and wanted to get curious about potentially things in my life that were contributing to my physical health that were actually emotional. And so it wasn't until, I did all kinds of natural things. I love the chiropractor, massage therapy, acupuncture. I really believe in a holistic approach. I didn't want to take medications, even as a nurse, for these things because medicines come with side effects. So,
Yeah.
you got to really evaluate what's right for you. And so it wasn't until I started doing my emotional work that I started to see the symptoms become less and less frequent. And when they come back, they're a sign now. They're a signal that says, hey, get curious, something's happening here. Your cortisol level is going up because you're super stressed and it's impacting your immune system. So that's kind of the first four chapters is really allowing people to look at the past not as a victim, but as somebody who has the ability to choose a different story. And then the last eight chapters are about going through the process to change the story and rewrite it. So it's
Wow.
really taking you to be the victor, the author of your story, to not let what things in the past or what people said to keep you stuck and not let your genius, your dreams come through. And life will not get easier. My life in this journey, the past 9 years, there has been so much trauma, cancers, all kinds of things in my family that would have kept me stuck before. But because I've learned these skills, I know how to regulate my nervous system. I can navigate through them, make sense, integrate it into my life, and it doesn't have to define me.
Wow. And Megan, when we talk about your book, Unstuck, where audience can buy it or hear from a MP3 format or how it's available in the market?
So it's available on Amazon right now in pre-sale. It will be available for you'll download in Kindle and also in print off Amazon and everywhere else, like Barnes and Noble and all of those things on July 30th. So already out selling it in the pre-sale. It is the download only, and it's only 99 cents right now because my mission is for more people to get unstuck. Our world would be a better place if we were willing to look at the hard and learn how to regulate our nervous system, learn that we can be with people who are different and that we don't have to agree to still love each other.
Wow. And Megan, when we talk about trauma, so
Mhm.
is this generational? I mean, genetic disease, or it's a kind of from a perspective of, let's say, let's assume a person who is working for a corporate culture, and he was suppressed by his managers and the pressure and deadlines and the stuff and the assignments and the task he need to accomplish on time, and the stuff some kind of pressure he or she might feel in the working environment. Do you
Mhm.
think this is a cause for trauma, or is it a kind of a genetical stuff?
So I think trauma comes from so many different places. I think, there's a lot of studies that are out there looking at generational trauma and how it affects us from a genetic standpoint with changes in our bodies. They've researched Holocaust. They've researched a lot of things, like really hard things that have happened in our world and how it's impacted the kids who didn't actually experience the event but are suffering from things from what their parents or their grandparents experienced. So I think it can get passed on in that way. There's this is it nature or nurture, right? So
Yeah.
we have the side of genetics where that's more the nature of things being passed down. Then we have the impact of trauma on us, as I'll use myself as an example in the nurture side. When I was wounded and I was parenting from a place of fear and control, I was wounding my children and I was teaching them unhealthy ways of dealing with their stress because I was people pleasing and exhausted. I was high achieving and not as present as I would have liked to have been. So I think there's a combination. And then, like you said, the workplace that we're in, you it is actually set up in a way that it really encourages dysfunction, right? Because
True.
I was a high achiever and a people pleaser. People love me. I advanced because what I could do for people, but I was miserable and unhappy, right? And so, because I didn't have boundaries, and if you had boundaries and you said no, there was this fear that you weren't going to be able to progress in your career. Now, in some cases, that's probably true. But if you get into a healthy environment and you have good boundaries and you still show up and with excellence, you don't have that same trauma that you experienced in the toxic environment. So it's really about assessing how do you feel? What is your body telling you? Because it's signaling to you, is it safe? Because if it's safe, it doesn't have anxiety, your heart's not palpating out of your chest. You don't want to run away. You don't want to go and just drink all night because you're just so tired from the day. Right? And so
Yeah.
then you have to decide, like, is what this environment require of me in order for me to succeed? Is that really what I want in my life? And you have to make those hard choices. But what I do know is when you do, you will get into the right environments and then you
Mm,
can still have success.
yeah. And the identifying trauma is a one step, and treating the trauma and the practical evidence-based tools are available right now.
Mhm,
And what evidence-based methods like EMDR or
mhm,
somatic experiencing or
mhm.
polyvagal theory have you seen be most effective for trauma healing?
So I really think everybody's an individual, right? And so what works for one person doesn't necessarily have the same effect on another person. And that's why it's so important to be exposed to many different ways of healing. And that's what my book is. It doesn't go into every single thing in depth, but it exposes you to different techniques because then you can like, oh, I can try that out. I can go to someone who does EMDR, or I can Google something on YouTube and I can watch tapping tutorials. I can learn mindfulness. I do a lot of mindfulness work on my It's Your Story to Tell YouTube, where there's mindfulness for so many things. You could like find something for whatever you're going through, and it kind of walks you through that. What I would encourage people is to try multiple modalities because uh, this is complex. And so we can't have a one size fits all solution. And if something doesn't work for you, don't stick in it. So, one of the things that isn't really the best resource for people going through trauma is talk therapy
Mm.
because you can get stuck in just talking about the trauma and never moving forward in it. And then that actually causes more harm and re-traumatizes yourself. So what I find is so valuable is having somebody who can, yes, listen and hold space for your story and remain regulated because co-regulation is so important. It's not something we know that it's important in our little children, but we actually don't really know how to do it very well. So, being in a safe environment where you share that, but then it's all about what is your dream? Where do you want to go? And let's make a plan for that. And our mind is so amazing. Our brain, the way it was designed to be reprogrammed. And so you don't have to stay stuck. You can start building new neural pathways that you choose. And that was so empowering when I realized that science says I don't have to stay here. And so, what really helped me when I had been in talk therapy for so many years and not seeing the progress in my life that I was hoping for was when I had a coach, a mentor, somebody who shared my story so she understood domestic violence. She understood the way it shapes your mind and how trauma from the past allowed me to get into these toxic, unhealthy relationships. And when my brain was not yet a healthy brain, I would actually go to her and say, this is what's happening. This is what I want to do. Because my old way of doing things was to try to people please the other person. And when it got really uncomfortable, give in. And that was not a healthy choice. So I would go to her because I trusted her advice and say, okay, from a healthy brain, from a person who's already been through this, how do I respond? How do I move forward? And because I had that support and I was now reprogramming and taking new steps, it was the first time I actually was able to leave and stay gone from that
Wow.
situation that was so unhealthy for me.
Wow. And Megan, I want to ask this question that a lot of people are trying to engage on, that journaling and the movement and the storytelling. Do you think might create new neural pathways for growth and recovery?
I do. I also think, I obviously love storytelling. My practice for my coaching and my podcast is called It's Your Story to Tell because I do believe when we're able to see the pain in our story, but yet
Mm.
choose to make purpose out of it, that just that ability to switch in your brain from something that was you were the victim of to now you're the victor of is so healing. And then when you start sharing your story with other people and they are encouraged by it, it allows you to continue going in your healing. And you also are giving back to others. And that is very rewarding. And so it makes the journey so powerful. When it comes to journaling, I think powerful about that is if you can just write and not edit yourself,
Mm,
because there's a lot of things that we think, but we're not willing to actually be honest and put them on paper or say them for fear of judgment from others, but even more judgment from ourselves. So when
true.
you can just sit there, ask yourself an open-ended question or have a question and just allow your mind to dump
Mm.
everything that it needs to come out, you're like, whoa, okay, I didn't know all that was in there, first of all. And
Yeah.
second of all, it just makes space where you're not
Mm,
trying to hold that back anymore. You're allowing it to come into the light. Because again, if it's there and you're trying to suppress it, you can't heal it. And
yeah.
so the act of getting it out on paper allows you to also see patterns.
Mm,
And then you can make different choices that you couldn't have before. So it really allows you to move out of being subconscious in the way you respond and react to being conscious and evaluating it and getting curious, loving yourself, right? I mean, because I thought I loved so well. I'm a nurse, I was a caretaker, I work really hard for people. It wasn't love though, because I was needing their validation to make me feel good about myself. So we were using each other. They were using me, I was using them. That is not a loving, caring environment. And what I realized is you can't give what you haven't been able to receive yourself. So I wasn't really able to receive love. I couldn't give love to myself. So then I couldn't give it
mm,
effectively. And so it starts with us. And then you're able to impact your family, your children, your community by doing this work. There's a huge ripple effect that ultimately, if we were all willing to just be vulnerable and look at the parts that we're not really very proud of, but if we did it, we wouldn't have to worry about them anymore because we wouldn't get stuck in them and we wouldn't keep bleeding our wounds on everyone else.
wow. This is a kind of a term I can realize that, and I can remember. Love yourself, and everything will love you.
Mm,
So, in short, and Megan, when we talk more about trauma and a specific term called neuroplasticity,
mhm.
and what it's mean, will it give a boost to the thinking ability, or how it will be feel? And I mean, in out of survival mode into a growth mode.
Mhm.
So a lot of contradictions and some supportive evidence also there for neuroplasticity. And from
Mhm.
your point of view, how you seeing this?
So I believe in neuroplasticity because I do believe the science supports it. I also believe the stories and the people that I work with in my own story. And I'm also spiritual. And so for me, the Bible was telling us that for ages, that we have the power to transform and renew our mind through being aware of our thoughts. And then if our thoughts are not in alignment with what we ultimately desire, so you have a dream, I have a dream. If it is not moving you towards things that are positive, love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, then how do you take that thought and make it different? So, neuroplasticity is the ability of our brain to be able to change. We have a choice in that. We can continue to not be aware and just keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, which you will never get because you will get the same thing. It
Yeah,
may look different. I did that. I had two marriages that weren't successful, but I wasn't healthy, right? And so I kept showing up the same, thinking, oh, I'm just going to change my environment. No,
yeah,
I needed to change. And so as I was able to have awareness of what my thoughts were, what were the false narratives, where did those even come from? Because those came from people, because we were created with limitless ability. And nothing is impossible. And so we've put those limits on ourselves. So how do we change that? And that is by taking your thoughts captive, choosing what you think about, and taking action even when you don't want to. So, a dialectical behavior therapy skill called opposite action is powerful. When I was trying to change my life, it didn't matter what the opposite action was. It was just that I was not going to do the same thing over and over. So I'm going to break that pattern. I'm going to say, did that work for me? Okay, no. Next time, let's try a different opposite reaction. But by doing something different, you are making new pathways in your brain to say, I can try different things.
Yeah. And when we reacting to stress, especially fight, freeze, and fawn responses,
Mhm.
so these are automatic nervous system. Can you explain this will impact on trauma side or the brain senses and how it will be improve the trauma stages, or can it reduce the trauma stages, and how a person can control this?
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a good question because when we feel unsafe, so we go into survival mode, and you mentioned there's few different types of survival mode. They keep coming up with more and more, but the standard fight or flight, freeze, fawn, and then there's a lot of new ones that they've come up with. But really, what that is anything that you turn to in order to avoid something else, right? Because
Mm,
this is really painful. We move into self-protection. And that was the way we were designed. So it's not that it's not working, it's just not working for you because it has programming that is telling you you're unsafe when you may not be actually unsafe. But you are unsafe because you didn't deal with things from the past. And that moment, that person that said something, that experience you had, it's not just that moment in front of you that your nervous system is remembering. It's remembering all the other times that you felt that way. And so let's say you were abused and then you felt intimidated by someone. Now, that person may not abuse you, but you automatically, your nervous system says unsafe. This is an abusive person. You need to respond. And so you're going to choose your response and how you avoid dealing with that. So in order to not allow an automatic response to take over, you have to make a split second, like, this is where awareness comes in and a lot of work to get to this point, but where you can say, I'm going to stop and take a deep breath. As soon as I feel my heart race, I'm going to pause for just a second and I'm going to make an assessment on, am I in danger right this minute? Because if I'm not in danger right this minute, I have time to think. I don't have
mm,
to just react. And so you take a deep breath. When you do that, your heart rate reduces. And there's all other things that you can kind of do to like snap yourself out of that because when you've lived in this fight or flight for so long, where you're just in this survival mode, it is really hard to break it. There's people who will recognize I am having so much anxiety or all these big feelings. They'll dunk their head in ice, like because they need something that like snaps them out of that response so that they can make a different decision. So that's the work help people do, and you do it with somatic experiencing, dialectical behavior. You're gaining all of these skills with the idea that you want to be able to remain conscious and not just let the old subconscious patterns keep you stuck and keep you responding in the same way that hasn't worked for you. And if you can't feel safe, you actually can't do the work because the work's going to trigger your emotions. And if you
mm.
don't continue to build your skills and increase your capacity or your resilience to sit with that discomfort, you can't get through it. So you have to work with someone, that is really aware of communicating with you how much is too far. You have to start really paying attention to yourself so that you don't go too far too fast and actually cause yourself harm.
Wow. And Megan, we were discussing much about trauma, and especially when it's come to neuroplasticity and how the responses will be, and how to identify the trauma, and how to treat it, and how to figure it out, and the limiting beliefs and all, and the belief system, especially evidence-based methods. We have explained psychological frameworks, and we have unveiled the book Unstuck of Megan, and which is available in Amazon right now. And Megan, we are near to exit, and I would like to continue this podcast and as a second episode and third, and I would like to continue, and we have a lot of questions to ask, and because of the limited time frame, and I would like to ask one more question at last, that a lot of listeners are listening to this podcast, and what is your advice for those youngsters and the people who are facing trauma right now, and some more especially in entrepreneurship field, which is mostly very stressful, at the same time trauma, and a lot of people even they have no idea what does it mean by trauma, and they are actually facing the trauma, and for that kind of people, what is your advice right now?
Well, I would first just say, can you be mindful for a moment and just sit with yourself and be honest? What are you feeling? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you not like your life? And are you dreaming of something more? Okay, let's just admit it, because what we're willing to admit, we can actually change. So it starts with that radical acceptance that you're not where you want to be, and that's okay because you can make a different choice, but you can't until you're willing to admit it. And then I would say you need to have compassion for yourself. The way you're responding, the choices you're making, there's science to support that you're not choosing this. Your brain is choosing it for you based off of the way it has been patterned. The good news is the neuroplasticity, so you can change it. And so having compassion for yourself and not that critical narrative of you're not good enough and all of those things, you have to really start changing the way you talk to yourself. So compassion, getting in community because you're not alone. And when you're in the midst of this, you feel alone. And so it feels bigger and you're isolated. And so there's no one who can speak truth. So it's just whatever's coming in your mind is on repeat. You have to get other people who have experienced these things that are further ahead than you, that can give you wisdom from where they've journeyed. And then I would say curiosity. Curiosity is what makes great entrepreneurs. So you probably have it if you are one, but oftentimes it's really hard to apply when it's in our hard that we've been avoiding, but it's the only way. And the powerful thing about curiosity and moving into, I like to tell people, you're a reporter. Think about being a reporter, or um, you're just there to ask questions, not with judgment, but just to gain understanding. So, starting with the five whys, I love. It's like, why am I feeling this way? Okay. My boss was not very nice to me. Why do I not like it when my boss treats me that way? It reminds me of the way my dad used to treat me when I was a little kid. Why did your dad treat you that way when you were a little kid? And you just keep uncovering, asking yourself multiple questions so that you can kind of get to the root of that experience and then offer yourself compassion. And it just is like this cycle that if you can continue to give yourself that, you can move forward, you can change your life, and you can have one that is filled with love and joy, and you can make your dreams a reality. You don't have to stay stuck.
Wow. Thank you very much, Megan.
I appreciate you having me, and I hope that your listeners enjoyed it. They can reach out to me if they have questions. I want to support as many people as possible.